Good evening and welcome to Law Talk, the show that brings the Constitution, the facts of the day, and the news that we read about to your home each month. Tonight, James Barrett and Mark Malachowski, we have a series of subjects just for you. Mark, what's our first subject tonight?
Well, the first we're going to talk about Prince and his untimely passing, and some of the issues that come up because he died without a will.
Okay, I understand you're talking about Prince, the rock star, the legend,
Right.
the person that a lot of people grew up listening to and really enjoyed his music. Why would somebody of that stature die without a will?
Well, that's a real mystery because you would think he'd have enough attorneys and people surrounding him, and his music's worth hundreds of millions in the future anyway. I don't know how much he has on hand, but it's quite a large estate. And so it's odd that he would die without a will or a trust.
Well, we're talking about somebody that died intestate without a will. And what do the laws of Minnesota look like as far as how we're going to go forward and adjudicate that large estate?
Well, in general, when a person dies without a will or intestate, their estate will be distributed according to the controlling state's laws of intestacy. And there's two kind of ways that can go. One is per stirpes, and what that means is that it's divided in equal share, with each share allotted to each living child of the decedent, and one to each predeceased child has descendants living at the decedent's death. So that's basically the way that everyone's getting a share. Okay. The other way it can go is per capita, and what happens there, you have to have a living member. In other words, if there was, like say if you had 3 sons, and one of them passed before you passed, the 2 sons would take and their descendants would take, but that one kind of branch of the family tree wouldn't take under per capita.
Okay, so per stirpes means that you get the right of representation,
right,
even if the direct offspring was no longer living. Their children could actually take as though they're part of the direct estate.
Right, it'd be technically be the issue. So the first level of issue would be, like say, the son or the daughter, and then there'd be the grandchildren. So in that case, even if the son or the daughter had passed, it would go per that share down to the grandchildren.
So if the shares are divided into thirds and one offspring was deceased, that side of the family would still take a third for if there was any right of representation for the offspring of the predeceased child.
Right. So if the passed away, like say, brother had 2 children, they could each take a 6.
Okay. Okay. So what I understand we're talking about here is we're talking about a very wealthy entertainer with a family. Now, I understand that he had, I believe, 5 half siblings and 1 real sibling. He had a sister, and then he had some half brothers and sister or something. I'm not clear on that because it seems like more people are coming out of the woodwork. And what I'm really concerned about...
Yeah, I seem to remember that I might have been an admitted adopted child.
You told me in high school that actually Prince was a distant relative.
Yeah, I remember.
I had forgotten that, but I will tell you...
I haven't got my claim in yet.
Why aren't you in Minnesota?
I haven't got my claim in yet.
You haven't got your claim in yet?
Yeah.
But how long do you have a right to put a claim in?
My creditor's claim, well, usually, you want to get things in about 60 days.
60 days.
You got to get going. So what happens here is that the sister will take, and then apparently under Minnesota law, it's possible that the half-sisters might take shares as well.
Okay, and I have read a little bit about that. I understand under Minnesota law, you actually would be dividing up everyone equally, even if they were a half or a stepbrother or sister. They actually take as though they're a direct sibling. So in this case, there'd be possibly 6 people that were siblings of some sort to Prince.
Right. And then, of course, Prince wasn't married at the time he passed, so I don't know if he was ever married.
Well, I understand he was married once, but then there was a divorce.
Right,
and
so that's out of the picture.
There's some issues about that, and there's a tragic story behind all that, but let's not get into that. Because
so generally what happens if you were married, then that would be a different distribution altogether.
Because then you would have a natural spouse.
Then you have, if the decedent's married, it goes to the community property goes to the surviving spouse. So that surviving spouse would actually take all.
So are they a community property state in Minnesota, so they would have been 50-50?
I'm not sure.
Then it
No,
was,
no, but I mean, if you pass and you have a wife, everything goes to the wife. So I mean, 100% would go to the spouse. But he didn't have a spouse, so now we're looking at issue or brothers, and if that doesn't happen, then it would go up to parents.
Well, what I see in this is
And
I saw
grandparents
that a
are
lot of family came out of the woodwork, and
Yeah.
I do understand that his initial estate, as done by there's an entertainment group that tracks the wealth of rock stars and entertainers. They said his general estate was worth about $300 million, but what they're not counting is a vault full of songs that are supposed to eclipse everything else he's done.
Yeah, there's some numbers that have come out of I saw that was $720 million worth of future
Future
royalties that they could see coming out of some of the things. he's
Well,
done.
then I have a question.
And also, you find in some cases, an artist actually becomes more popular and worth more after their death. That happens quite often.
Well, I think we're going to cover some of that in our second segment. But as we look at it today, I see one of the biggest problems is that they're going to have different parts of the family arguing like vultures over his estate. And what's sad about all this is I did a little research on Prince, and I looked at what he had gone through the last 5-7 years. He had cycled through a long series of attorneys. In fact, his last attorney said he refused to sign anything at any time.
Well, was he signing as the otherwise known as the artist?
The artist otherwise known,
formerly known as Prince. Right,
no, this is he settled that problem.
Yeah, he settled that
But
one.
what happened was that he would want to negotiate his own deals
Right.
with concert promoters and with record companies and with internet, social media downloads. And so what happens is he would do all these things without contracts. And I can only imagine where this is going to go when they all start coming back and saying, "Oh, by the way, I had the royalties for all his music here, and I had all the royalties for his downloads, and I had all the royalties for this concert that we taped and filmed, and that's going to be movie 1, and then there's going to be movie 2, and then and what I'm seeing is nothing but a quagmire in the Prince estate, and it starts right at the top with the sister who said. Fortunately, one of the first things she said is that we should have a judge on this. So a judge was appointed or assigned by the local jurisdiction to monitor the distribution of his estate. Mm-hmm. And now, the problem comes down. If it was as simple as just dividing it up in between the 6 members of the family.
Well, I think, first of all, there's another issue is like, what is the estate? What constitutes the estate? Of course, there may be debts or taxes, that kind of thing, but actually, what is the estate? I think that's going to be a huge dispute. In other words, people who are concert promoters and record labels or whatever, they're going to say, no, we own this. The state doesn't own this. So I think there's going to be a huge fight.
That's what that one attorney was talking about, his refusal to sign anything.
Right.
And where we're talking about now is, so now this estate distribution is going to turn into a mystery investigation of who gets what. And at the core of it will be the vultures, the closest family he had. And then there's going to be a question, are there charities that he always gave to that had an expectation? Did he actually leave?
And the omitted children.
Yeah, and who knows if he has any children.
The omitted orphan children that he adopted.
That would be Mark and Jim.
Yeah.
I'd settle for a pure, 15%.
Yeah, well, wait a minute. If we took 50, I'd give you 25.
You know what we can do? We can split that, and I won't argue with you. I won't sue you.
Okay, right.
Yeah, we'll leave out the rest. But my biggest concern is, once again, it's going to be another one of these unfortunate circumstances where somebody that was so talented he's going to be remembered as the shootout at the OK Corral, or the good, the bad, and the ugly between the family. And what's sad about all this is that family will be fighting each other for the rest of their lives, and who knows what evil is already going on as we sit here today. And this whole event is so tragic.
Well, it is a tragic event. Apparently, he was self-medicating, and that led to, respiratory distress. And apparently he was in an area when he passed that he didn't have anyone to assist him.
All right, well, we're going to cover that part in a different show, but I think we should move on. What's our second subject tonight?
Okay, well, when we're talking about pop stars, I think we should talk a little bit about Michael Jackson. Now, this is a little bit different. He passed some time ago, but the war rages on with the IRS.
Oh, we're talking the IRS again. Okay, let's start at the top. Michael Jackson was allegedly nearly broke when he died.
Well, according to his estate, he was worth $2,104.
I also understand that everything he owned was in hock to somebody else.
Right.
I also understand that he didn't even own the rights to his music portfolio, and that in fact, when they say that's what he's worth, that was what was reported from as an estate attorney, reported that to the IRS. And of course, the IRS, being that lovable group that they are.
Well, Koskinen.
Oh,
Uncle Koskinen,
yeah. Mr. Honesty. In the goal of trying to dredge more money from the dead.
Well, the IRS says it's 434 million. So
that was the size of his estate.
Yeah, well, they're saying the estate's saying it's worth $2,000 roughly, and the IRS is saying it's 434
million. There's a big difference there.
So there's a slight discrepancy there that I think's got to be ironed out.
Is that a rounding?
Yeah, it's a rounding error.
Rounding error.
Kind of like the whatever the Russian deal.
Yeah.
But okay,
a billion here and a billion there.
It adds up after a while.
Yeah.
So, well, they claim, the state's claiming that Papa Icahn was worth almost nothing when he died, and that there was accusations about the child molestation, rumors of heavy drug use, called many of his sponsors to drop him. So a lot of the money that he had coming in, on
a regular basis,
copiously, that had kind of dried up, and so. He wasn't really bringing in the cash that he.
This brings up a real interesting question. The way the IRS is arguing it now, they're saying, well, we tax on what you're worth when you die.
Right.
What I'm trying to understand here is if he'd gone through all those negative events, which makes him not the Pepsi-Cola Kid of the Year, and then you have him, and they're saying, well, wait a minute, he has all this income, but isn't there a change in the estate where it comes down to the point where it's the people that are handling the estate that are actually generating further income? It's not necessarily Michael. He's not generating the income.
Well, in a way he is, in a way he isn't, because it would still be his intellectual property, his royalties, his creations, or copyrights, right? So what he created during his lifetime has a value, and then they're saying, well, future value.
Hang on. See, that's what I'm going at. But the IRS rule says it's supposed to be the value at the time of death. It's not supposed to be into perpetuity, and that's what they're arguing here.
So you're talking about the rule against perpetuity?
The rule against perpetuity.
Are you going to recite
the
that?
IRS.
Are you going to recite the rule against perpetuity for us?
I'm not going to rule perpetuity. I'm saying that they want to tax him into perpetuity. And this is, okay, at the time of his death, if he's worth X,
right.
You can't just say, oh, by the way, we made a mistake. He's actually worth $1 billion. And so even though you paid taxes at the time and we accepted it, in which they did, now they're saying he owns on the principals $500 million, plus he owns $200 million in penalties for failure to pay, when in fact the IRS already said that they did pay. So my question is, isn't it the IRS trying to write the rules and have their own way at the loss for the children of Michael Jackson that should be able to benefit from their father's popularity?
Well, it seems to me that there's kind of a gray area here where they could go after him. They could say, hey, whatever copyrights he had some kind of value. And I think that's with the IRS argument. But the question is this the value at maturity, or is it a garage sale value? So I think that's what it comes down to.
Okay, I bring up an example. Picasso.
I mean, is this a fire sale value?
Yeah, well,
or is this, if you sit on it for 20 years, then it's worth something?
Wow. Well, this is the Picasso example.
Right.
When Picasso dies, his painting's worth, okay, great, it's worth 20 grand. But what, about 20 years later, by the way, it's 50 million.
If you ever go to the Palace of Legion of Honor in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Then you have the Speckles, the sugar people. Yeah. Speckles' wife, I forget her name, but she bought straight from Rodin. As soon as he made a sculpture, she bought it.
Yeah.
Now those are worth,
hundreds of millions of dollars.
So much, but she bought them,
wait a minute, when she died, did they bill it at what it was going to increase to?
Accrue, yeah.
Accrue. See, this is where I'm saying that I believe the IRS is twisting the law to say, oh, by the way, his estate
Someday, some way.
Well, what
Yeah.
they're saying is his estate was worth $1 billion
Well, they're
when he
saying
died, when
400
that's completely not correct.
434 million. is what they're-
434 million. That's
which is
incorrect.
a lot, which is a lot.
But that's incorrect for them to say, oh, okay, did he have 434 in the bank?
Yeah.
No, he didn't. Did he have? What did he own? He didn't even own the Beatles portfolio. Was totally on Hawk when he
Right.
died. He didn't own that. He didn't own the Netherland Ranch.
Well, actually, there's something when you one advantage of doing a trust, and so you don't go into probate. One thing is, like, say you have $1 million house, but it's in a Hawk, it's underwater 900,000, and then it goes through probate. The percentage, which is whatever 3, 4, 5, 6% that the attorney and the executor take, it's out of the million that it's appraised for.
Yeah.
It's not what's in there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of times people think, oh, well, follow the common sense rule, but the common sense rule is not always the legal rule, you know? So the common sense rule would be, well, if the house is 900,000 underwater, right, and then it's valued at 100,000, but it's assessed at the million, and so
it's the assessed
it's
value.
assessed value.
And
so that's kind of a similar
That's
thing.
a different vulture.
Yeah, that's a different.
That's a probate attorney vulture.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's the same thing where the common sense view of this would be one thing, and the IRS is coming in with a kind of a pretzel logic to say, well, wait a minute, we want to have, perpetuity, payment in perpetuity after you sat on it, after you safeguarded it, after it matured.
Yeah, but see, this is what I'm saying. The IRS rule makes absolutely no sense. What would make
it's pretzel
sense?
logic. It's like as usual, the government has a pretzel logic.
Well,
Very twisted
I'm gonna
logic.
agree with that because here's the deal: if you want to go that, it would be like every famous artist that ever lived.
Right.
It would be like guessing what his artwork is worth the day he dies, and says, "Well, geez, that Rembrandt didn't go very far. I mean, I could barely get it at Joe's Pizza." But
Right.
now, all these years later,
Right.
hey, come on. Oh, Rembrandt, hey. And that's what I'm saying. Picasso and all the modern artists,
Right.
what their work was, what was it taxed at when they died?
Uh-huh.
And so how do you say that? And for them to look at Michael Jackson and say, okay, now I can understand if the estate attorneys lied. I got that.
Well, sure. If
but
it
if
was fraud,
they didn't lie and they just told what was on the account and the balances, what are you
Right.
supposed to say?
right.
So that's my point. And that's why I don't understand this. I know it's a major war, and I think we're going to have to wait and try that on one of our future shows. So what's our third subject tonight, Mark?
Okay, well, then we have some brothers that were in the money for a while, but now they're broke. It's the Menendez brothers.
You're talking about Lyle and Eric Menendez.
Yeah, and they got in a little trouble because they got a little impatient.
Oh, you mean they wanted their inheritance before their parents were ready to go?
Well, it was kind of like, remember Caligula?
Oh, of course.
And then Caligula, he put on the emperor's ring and he went out there, I'm the new emperor, and then the guards came up to him and said, well, your uncle's recovering. And he's like, well, I better go check on this. And then took the pillow and,
Yeah.
uncle never made it back.
Well, I saw the movie Gladiator, which duplicated that pretty well. Yeah, it's like, oh, you look so unhealthy right now.
You're not looking so
But
good.
anyway, I understand the Menendez brothers use something a little more dastardly. They actually, it's an interesting story. They actually used a shotgun on their parents. They were watching a James Bond film.
Right.
And they killed their father first with a shotgun blast to the back of the head. And then when the mother, who must have nodded off and fallen asleep, jumped up, she realized that her sons were ruthless murderers. She started running. They blasted her about 5 or 6 times. And what was interesting about this, the loving children, they blew their knees off to make it look like a gangland hit.
Right. Well, they wanted to make it look like a robbery or
Yeah,
some kind of...
something a little more dramatic than
some-
just the sons Xing them off.
Right.
And I guess that's what loving families really have, the heart of a Remington or a Mossberg in your closet, ready to bring it on home for Dad.
Yeah, so that was kind of a how do you say, an exciting way to move the money around.
To move the inheritance
Move
forward.
yeah, because they thought maybe their parents were like taking their time.
Yeah, well, I also understand that one of the things that got the police's attention, even though the police believed they were suspects or persons of interest in the beginning, which is a new term related to that crime.
Well,
They had alibis. They had actually gone to the movies and watched a James Bond movie, and then they went out partying with friends afterwards. So they had this little alibi they'd built.
Well, it's kind of, wasn't it kind of like, what was the thing when OJ did it was like, get to the airport with an hour to kill?
Yeah, an hour to kill.
Yeah, okay. So,
I got to hurry up. I'm going to be late.
But, I mean, I'm still saying there's some time missing there.
Yeah, there is a missing time. It's that time it took him to get from Beverly Hills to the movie theater.
And I also think there's a certain, there's a certain specificity when you start looking at time of death.
Yeah.
At the corner. So they
have
some
well,
pretty
think
good.
about a shotgun. It kind of wipes out some stuff. It's not like you poison somebody and they're laying there in a certain position.
The rigor mortis.
Yeah, the rigor mortis is already set in. But when you're blowing somebody up with a shotgun, it's a little different. There's so much blood.
But still, I'm saying they still have some time to account for.
Yeah, and so what they did was they actually went and saw James. They wanted, what's funny is they wanted to go see a Batman movie, but it was sold out. So they wound up having to go see a James Bond movie. That started a little later, so it kind of disrupted their timeline a little bit. That goes to your timeline statement. But as soon as they got out of the movie, they were really excited to go call their friends and have a few cold ones, and then come back and discover their parents had been deceased. But anyway, what the bigger thing was here was the police, although they suspected them, what they actually did is watch them. And what they saw was the two brothers spent over $1 million in the 6 months after their parents were murdered by some intrusion.
Yeah. So anyway, the estate was valued at $14.5 million when the case broke, and then but the family estate has almost been entirely depleted by taxes and legal fees at this point.
Well, the taxes. There's the IRS. They're going.
The taxes.
Hey, what's this value of death?
Yeah, the value, and also. So there's still some prime Beverly Hills real estate, millions of dollars in entertainment industry stocks in one house in Calabasas, condominium, New Jersey, some jewelry, a few pieces of furniture, about $650,000 in cash, but about $11 million has been spent out of the $14 million.
Well, what my question is, and I was under the impression that a criminal cannot benefit from the fruits of his crime, and I'm curious how they even have the ability to be able to use that money. I mean, whether or not it was in the will that they would both inherit, wouldn't that wouldn't that money be reverted to the state or put in some kind of trust or?
Well, apparently a lot of it went to the defense.
And
so the money was,
but
I know, but that was before they were convicted.
So they okay, but
so there you go.
It's like okay.
So how are they going to?
So
and how are they going?
I know. If I was involved with the murder of somebody that I was with, and hey, by the way, I was the only one that benefited from the insurance.
No, but I mean, how are they going to pay it back? Now they're both doing life, and they're not making that much in prison. So how are they going to pay back the money they spent on their lawyers?
Well, I don't know, but it takes a lot of license plates, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I think it's just kind of a matter of cash flow. So
well, the question is, how much do they spend in prison? That's one thing I couldn't find any numbers on.
Well,
what are they allowed to spend?
I don't think they spend that much in prison. I think that most of it was spent on their defense and taxes.
Are they still looking for attorneys?
I think they may well be.
They still have $3 or $4 million left?
No, they still have.
What do you think, Mark?
No, they still
go down.
They still got $650 in cash.
Or?
But they have a house they could possibly put a lien on. So yeah,
they're sign it.
They're doing now. I don't know if they're eligible for parole. I'm not sure if it's life without parole.
Life without parole. And here's the interesting part about this.
And now, didn't one of them get married?
Both of them got married.
They both got married. Okay.
And one got divorced and remarried.
Okay.
It's just a lifestyle in the prison.
So basically, what we're talking about is that their wives could take out of the state.
Well, see, that's what I'm curious about.
And then I vaguely remember being an omitted child here. I think I may have been adopted by Prince, Michael Jackson, and the Menendez brothers.
If you were adopted by Michael Jackson, unfortunately, you might have gone through something. But anyway, and by the way, Michael Jackson was the star of my youth growing up. I watched him since the first day I saw him on Ed Sullivan. Anyway, so here's the deal. Let's go back to the Menendez brothers. They have been married, but there's no conjugal visits allowed on death row.
Yeah.
or people that are on life without possibility of parole. So
Right.
in fact, they have an imagination, but I don't know if they even get letters that are sexy or whatever they get, because I think everything's pretty well covered, so they can't
And then
get
I
excited.
don't know, but I don't know if all their appeals are exhausted or if there's any.
Their appeals are exhausted. They tried numerous appeals. In fact, funny enough, they had actually won on appeal.
But they might be able to do a habeas corpus on new evidence, right?
Well,
Discovered evidence.
What's the newly discovered evidence?
Well, that would be something we have to find if we want to get.
we want to collect some of that.
We want to get the last
600,
the last 650,000. Yeah. We better find some. Yeah. So it looks like they're kind of in a tight spot, and.
But wait a minute. There's one thing I want to add here. Do you know how they got caught? The police couldn't catch them.
Uh-huh.
The police could not catch them. The younger brother confessed to his. Here's the trick part of this. Confessed to his psychoanalyst on tape through a series of meetings, and then he would have never been. They would have never been able to ever play that in court, except for he threatened to kill the doctor, which broke the doctor-patient relationship. So in reality, it was he not only did he confess, but then he threatened to kill the doctor.
Well, that would break confidentiality.
That would kind of break some confidentiality in my book.
Yeah.
But guess what? They were going to exclude the only testimony and the only evidence they had against him were these tapes. And on appeal, the Menendez brothers won.
Right.
But then the Supreme Court of California said, no, you can't do it. And in fact, the Supreme Court said you can play the tapes, but they didn't even play the tapes that said he did it. And I'm going to wind this up here a little bit and let you know this. They had hung jury.
Right.
And the first one was done on court TV.
Right.
And so they had the courtroom was open like the media center.
Right.
And as a result of that, the jury was under the gun, and I guess they were under the lights and all that. But they hung the jury and said they didn't do it. But on the second one, the new judge said no cameras.
Right.
And they get the tapes to play, except for there's like 2 tapes that talk where he said I did it.
Right.
They didn't even play those. But get this one. You know what the defense was on both trials? That they had been molested by their father.
That was like
beaten.
kind of like a battered children defense.
Okay, well, I think that's it for tonight. And I will tell you this. This is an interesting story, but the Menendez are gone. What's the bigger story is Prince and Michael Jackson and what's going to happen at the end of those exciting events.
Still going to remember those.